Hello and thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm sharing with you a mixed media canvas that was inspired by Finnabair's October mood board. For this challenge you were encouraged to use jewel paste, effect paste, metallic flakes, the journaling pad, and the colors teal, navy, and orange. So I deviated a little bit off of this, but for the most part my project does stick to this mood board. If you would like to hop over and check out that challenge, I believe it's still up. But back to the project at hand. I started by coloring a few bits that I knew that I was going to use with some impasto paint. And now I'm moving on to the base, which is this triangle canvas that I picked up at the craft store. I sprayed a bit of water and I'm working these two metallic paints into the background. This is a quick way to get the look of texture without too much texture, but still a lot of movement in the background. So during this process, I'll start with one color and I'll dry in between, and then I'll add the second color. I had started with Midnight Sky and I'm moving on to Royal Blue. And I'm going to continue to use these paints with a lot of water and dry in between. And if I'm not happy with it, I'm going to continue to add more paint and then dry again, as you can see I'm doing now. And it's just a random pattern, it's nothing specific. Now I'm moving on to my combination of my 3 blues for my liquid acrylics. And again, all the products will be listed below in the description. A little bit of water, or a lot of water, and I'm just going to move this paint around until I cover the canvas completely. I do try to focus on the sides of the canvas as well, so they're not stark white. And once I do dry the liquid acrylics, you will see more of the metallic paint shining through and giving it a little bit more texture, or dimension I should say. Once I'm happy with this, I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick dry, and then we'll go on to our next step, which is coloring this heart. This heart is an old relics and artifact that I had in my stash. It's just a resin bit. You could replace it with a multitude of things I'm sure that you might have on hand in your stash. I'm just coloring it with a little bit of alcohol ink. I'm using a mix of orange and yellows for the flame, and the heart I'm going to do with a mix of blues and teal. Now I'm going to move on to my teal and my mix of blues, and I'm going to continue the same process, just adding layers of color, dropping color on top of color until I'm happy with the way that it looks. Once I get the entire heart covered and I'm happy with the blues, I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick spray with rubbing alcohol just across the top. Now it's nothing fancy, it's just what I had on hand in the house, but it does give it a little droplet effect on top of the alcohol inks, and you'll see me do that here. And then I'm going to move on to my next step. Now I'm going to use a bit of black gesso through this older check pattern, which is it's one of Finnabair's older stencils. It's still one of my favorites. But before that I do that, I'm going to add just a little bit of shadow around the base of the canvas to make sure that I've covered any white parts of the canvas. Now I'm going to add a little bit of random checks, just using a sponge and some black gesso. Just another way to add a little bit of something in the background without too much dimension. Here we go. And just randomly adding. I'm not covering the full canvas, just a little bit here and there. I do believe I do a set of 3 just because it's a triangle, so I'm really going to try to stick with that odd number. I'm adding a little bit of sparks for splatters. I'll do this again on the sides of the canvas as well. Again, I'm just adding things that don't add a lot of texture, but do add to the canvas. Once this is dry, I'll go ahead and add my next layer, which is a book of numbers, and I'm going to use jewel paste through this. And again, I'm not using the whole stencil, just parts of it randomly. And you'll see once I get this applied, I'm going to lift it up and get the other corner. Carefully placing the stencil and adding more paste. Once this is dry, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my heart, and I wasn't happy with the alcohol inks not being sparkly, So I'm just adding a little bit of sparks throughout the flame just to accent the colors. And for this I used Phoenix Feather and Ginger Magic. Once I'm happy with that, I'll give it a quick dry and move on to my next step. I'm just going to stamp the heart randomly and add a little bit of embossing powder. It's a very subtle effect, but it does add to the overall look. There's the embossing powder, and then I'll heat that up with the embossing gun. And once that's done, I'm going to move on to the chipboard chains. Now for this, I had already painted them with a little bit of black gesso off camera, and I'm just adding a little bit of glue to them, and I'm going to randomly add the metallic flakes around these chains. This does go on for quite some time, and it's quite messy, and I wasn't very patient with this, so it's going to skip ahead, and you're just going to see that the chains are magically very sparkly at the end of this process. There you go. There it is. I'm going to go ahead and add some more of the metallic flakes inside of this little locket. I do wind up adding a little bit of blue liquid acrylic off camera to that. I probably should have went back and added some more glitter to that, but it looks pretty good, I think. And now I'm going to start building my composition. I adhered the circle chain, and now I'm adding the 2 chain links. And then I'm going to add a mold that I had previously poured. This I had painted off camera with a little bit of the blue paint, and I'm going to brighten it up with the metallic royal blue. I didn't really like the locket being as dark as it was either, so I'm going to add the royal blue to that as well. So I'm going to quickly add some blue paint on this mold. But before I add my heart to the canvas, I'm going to add some wire accents to it. So I'm just going to wrap a little bit of gold wire around the connection of the heart and the flame. And now I'm going to add some beads to a wire cluster that I'm going to add to the canvas as well. And it's just a little something to add a little bit more blue to the canvas. So you can see I'm beading some blue beads onto gold wire. And then it skips ahead. Now I'm going to add a little bit of vintage gold wax to my accents. Some resin pieces here that were blue that I painted in the beginning. I'm going to add a little gold to the locket, and then the base resin piece as well. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of the gold on the heart that I had used the clear embossing powder. Just very, very lightly, nothing too drastic. Once I'm happy with that, I'll adhere everything. I did have to use a little bit of cardboard to make everything level. And you can see I'm putting this together now. Here's the wire cluster. And I'll shape those after everything dries off camera. I'm going to put the heart in place. Make sure everything's lined up. And then I'm going to add the locket on top. Once I'm happy with the placement of my locket, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more resin bits on top of the locket. And you can see these little flourishes. And then I'm going to walk away and let this dry, because if not, every time I picked it up, it fell apart. So once these 2 resin flourishes are in place and dry, I'm going to go ahead and move on to some Golden Dragon effect paste, and I'm randomly placing this around the canvas. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just anywhere that I felt needed an extra little sparkle. So you'll see me begin to add it on the chain, around the base of the heart, and I'm going to go really heavy-handed over top of the flame. I really wanted to add that glitter and all that sparkle on top of the flame. This effect paste is just a really quick, easy way to make everything cohesive and add a little bit of sparkle and shine without adding, without having to get out your glitter, without having to get out, a bunch of stuff onto your desk. It's all in one little container, so it's easy to use. So it makes it super handy. Anyhow, once I get all this glitter inside the locket, I'm going to continue around the base of the heart, and then I'm going to add my star. My star I do go ahead and paint blue, and then I'm going to add just a touch of white gold wax on top of that, and that'll wrap up this canvas. So I do hope that you've enjoyed my process, and as always, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate you spending your time with me. And I would be really grateful if you consider subscribing, as I'm only 50 subscribers away from my goal of 1,000, and I would really like to hit that this year. But again, thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. I love to read them, and I'll be happy to answer them as soon as possible. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and you have a great day. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.